2019 was actually a rather good year for popular music. Now, I know I'm in a minority when I say this, and believe me, I didn't always view this year this way, but looking at this year from the perspective of making this worst list, even with my lenient rules, I was actually rooting for bad songs to become hits around 3/4 of the way to the end of the year. I could kind of form a worst list after a certain point in the year, but at the same time, I do not feel comfortable putting a bunch of those songs on the list proper, to the point where I considered stretching my rules to have a stronger list. Let me stress for those who don't know, I am very stubborn to sticking to my rules, and I do not stand by those times I broke them, even if I stand by almost all said songs not being good. Usually by the really late weeks of the Billboard year, I ignore those weeks and push the newly eligible songs into representing the next year's hits, as long as they also meet the requirements, of course, but I really held out hoping something terrible would swoop in, which for the record did happen, but that says a lot about the year. Meanwhile, my best list had 4 songs I was pissed I had to cut by the end of August, although I'd rather not talk about that until we get there. If you don't know why, then you'll just have to wait and find out. So with that in mind, we might as well do this. For a song to be eligible, it had to be in the top 40 of the Billboard Hot 100 for 2 weeks during the 2019 Billboard year. It starts on the first week of December and ends on the last chart week of November. Got that? I hope so, because it's time we take out what little trash we do have. So for the last fresh time of this decade, these are the top 10 worst hit songs of 2019. Number 10. This was a very good year for country music. Yeah, Nashville might have fought Old Town Road from being on their chart just to end up accepting it at their award shows, but that song helped their genre in a massive way. In my time heavily following the charts, I've only seen not real country songs like Body Like a Back Road and Meant to Be break the top 20. But in 2019, there were 5 actual country songs to do so, one of which broke the top 5 and another peaked at 11. And even with a situation like Casey Musgraves winning Album of the Year at the Grammys this year, country music seems to be doing really well. Now, if only country radio would actually play women, but that's a conversation for another day. The thing with country music is there's still a stigma around hating the genre. It's probably the most common genre to dislike, which is rather unfair. Yes, its stereotypes show themselves accurate more times than they really should. Let's not forget the biggest country hit in years with no pop act attached was called Body Like a Back Road. But with that aside, like every genre, there are legitimately great songs in country music, and thankfully a lot of hits from the genre recently have been really good. Granted, the biggest country act out right now is Luke Combs, and his big hit this year was absolutely terrible. And it was on the list until December 3rd, 2019, remember that fact. But regardless of Beer Never Broke My Heart not being on the list, it sucked so much. Sure, I could put a legitimately huge country act that made a shitty song onto the list, but I can also go with an artist who followed in BB Rexha's footsteps and decided to be a total hack and use Nashville artists to get greater success, as well as being on the country chart. So with that said, hey Marshmello, fuck you. This song isn't on the dance and electronic chart. It is on the country chart where it hit number 1. I could rehash old rants and be mad about that, but what's the point? The song's genre doesn't matter because either way it's terrible. Marshmello isn't good no matter what genre he's making. EDM, trap, rock, hip-hop, brostep, pop, now country, it's all shit. And I've heard all 3 of his Joytime albums, and currently it's the worst trilogy I have ever personally experienced. Say what you will about Happier, Here With Me, Everyday, Silence, hell, even the songs I don't like such as Wolves, Friends, and One Thing Right. At least they aren't so painfully non-existent that I wonder how anyone can like something so void of anything. But even with that said, that does not excuse anything about this dumpster fire. For a little bit I could understand the appeal and the groove of this song, but for one, it's very far from anything special, and more relevantly, that drop throws everything out the window. Marshmello's never really had a great drop, but this is by far the worst one he's had yet. Like, what do you want me to say here? It speaks for itself. Who the hell greenlit this? Who thinks it sounds good? And why would you make this? What do you gain? This probably would have been a hit off the names attached to it as is. You could have gotten similar success with a drop that wasn't that. For a while, the only thing I could kinda defend was the content until I actually thought about it. He's cheated, lied, cried, overall he's done a bunch of shit, but he got one thing right, and that's you. My issue with this kind of sentiment is, well, you can't really take responsibility for her. Even coming in from the mindset of you chose her to be the person you dated, they still have a say in the matter, and if you view it from the perspective of he picked this person out of all the other people, yeah, maybe it can be cute or charming, but it kind of makes you look like a self-entitled tampon acting like he could have had anyone but settled for you. bite me. But with all of that said, none of it is the worst part of this song. Now, let me back up a bit. On some of Marshmello's albums, there are some songs where there's a singer who isn't featured. That singer would be Marshmello. And unlike Andrew Taggart, who's genuinely improved as a vocalist, or Calvin Harris, who's not the best singer but his voice is kinda charming, Marshmello sucks.
And we're screaming from the rooftop, screaming till the heart stops.
These kind of vocals especially don't work over Marshmello's flavorless EDM shit, but I bring this up because I noticed something on One Thing Right I didn't see other people bring up. Starting at the bridge, Marshmello can be heard singing. He has a bunch of effects on his voice, and he sounds even worse than usual. Chris Brown had a good year. Kodak Black got a couple of hits, yet this is the worst vocal performance on a hit this year. That's a low bar, but of course Marshmello said it. You aren't a Calvin Harris, and you aren't an Andrew Taggart. Do not sing, ever. Even with the effects on your voice, you sound terrible. Hell, you're such a bad producer, you sound worse. And then Marshmello holds a note over Kane Brown's hook, over the drop, and it's the worst thing. In the past, I said Marshmello reminded me of Daft Punk, in the respect of Daft Punk's helmet design resembling the futuristic music they make, where Marshmello chose his design of a marshmallow because he makes bland and sterile whiteness. Also because it's too hard to stomach too much of it at once. But I really associate him with marshmallows because I want to light him on fire. Kane Brown, maybe you've only done one thing right, but at least it's still more than Marshmello has. Number 9. So out of all the songs on the worst list this year, this is the one I know will be the most controversial. And I have to ask, why?
No masterpiece.
I thought we were tired of Migos doing the same shit over and over again. I don't think the draw to this song are their flows. Yeah, they're solid, but they almost always are. And Migos' last few singles haven't really done too well. I don't see why the Mustard collaboration would draw all these eyes considering he's never had a hit as a lead artist. And the last hits he's had were producing for Ella May, and I doubt there's too much overlap for that, or that a lot of people even know he produced those. While I know the draw to this isn't the content, because of course it's also the same type of shit you can hear on any other Migos song. Although Quavo and Takeoff managed to embarrass themselves by appropriating foreign slang.
I'm not from Canada, but I see a lot of teams.
Can we please stop saying ting? I almost never want to hear that word. It's gotten kind of cringy at this point, if I'm being completely honest. Migos are so uninspired at this point that it's hard to even get mad at them for not trying because it's Migos. That's just what they do now. No, from what I've been told, it's the instrumental that draws the attention from people. And that instrumental is the exact same reason I put it on the list. Now, people seem to like this in the same vein they like Tyga's Taste, and in comparison, that makes a little sense. Because this is what Taste sounds like. And this is what Pure Water sounds like.
One bad bit look like a masterpiece.
Taste worked because the low-key flows sailed incredibly over the incredible instrumental, where Pure Water is so yelpy and grating. But from what I've gathered, people will just eat up songs with vocal samples no matter how good they may be. Okay, I think I get that. Well, with this in mind, I present to you the beat for the next smash hit everybody's gonna love. I can't wait to see that hit the top 40.
Good night.
Number 8. This was a great year for Young Thug, and I'm mostly glad about that. He got his second highest peaking single this year. He got his 2 highest peaking singles as lead artist this year, along with a massive #1 album that had a notable album bomb on the Hot 100. Young Thug overall seems like a great guy, and I do quite enjoy his music and having him around. He had a lyric this year about having a girl eat semen in the garage, and I still liked his performance on that song. He's got a boatload of charisma, and the more hits he gets, even if I might not love all of them, I can't say that's really a bad thing. Especially if he's performing better than his copycats, because the less of those we have around, the better off we'd all be. Now thankfully this is one of those hits I can mostly avoid all year. I legit never heard it on the radio once, and if it weren't for Billboard and Quarb's radio charts, I wouldn't have even known radio played it at all. That's why this is as low as it is, but it's also terrible enough to still be here, and it's for a bunch of reasons you can probably expect. I can like Lil Baby when he has a good flow and isn't pronouncing everything in a slurred mush like on Drip Too Hard, and even when he can tap into something vulnerable and personal like on Close Friends or his admittedly out of place yet great verse on Post Malone's On the Road. But at the same time, all of those performances were over great instrumentals from Turbo, or in On the Road's case, Nick Muir and Louis Bell. But with Baby, you have Wheezy dropping in another sloppy, bland, and boring as hell instrumental. Like, you can make a minimalistic instrumental, but you should also make it good. And a generic and bad instrumental of course means Lil Baby is going to default into a generic and bad mush of a performance. And even if it's not as bad of a performance as he gave on, say, Global, that doesn't mean it's anywhere close to good.
Baby, really a problem, somebody gotta stop him, man. Haters watching too hard, I think they got binoculars.
All his bars feel way too long and run on, that just makes it drag out for so long. It just kind of drones on until the baby comes right the hell out of nowhere with a lot of energy, creating complete tonal whiplash.
Keep it real with these people, baby like a preacher. Baby probably still got them bows.
Sorry if you had headphones in, but you get my point. Now, I like DaBaby, but he does not fit this song at all. And normally it'd be a fresh of breath air. Really, Andrew? Really? That's what you wrote? Normally it'd be a breath of fresh air from this song, but the thing is, DaBaby's a very one-dimensional rapper in terms of his flow and content, which would be fine if he got good instrumentals under him. If he had a cleanly produced project, I could give it a legitimately good score. But despite being his second album, I'd argue the beats on Kirk were mostly bad. It was a step in the wrong direction. Granted, at least they had more personality than this shit, and with that, DaBaby's bars don't save this at all. If I want to hear him call himself a CEO, I have Suge. And his line about getting jiggy would be cool if 21 Savage didn't already do it better on Quavo's last album. Yeah, the Mardi Gras titties line is amusing, but that's one decent line on a dog shit song. Now, with the title card, you may have noticed I gave credit to Quality Control, which, if you don't know, is the label behind this song, a song which appears on the label's compilation Control the Streets Volume 2. Despite being the main credit on platforms like iTunes, Spotify, etc., most people, including Billboard, only gave credit to the babies. And normally I do the same, but this is a different case, because with this song, I don't see two artists working together because they like each other's work and they want to collaborate together. I see a label who found meme potential and chose to capitalize on it to get success and money. Oh, two rappers are popular right now with Baby in their name. Well, we have one of them signed to our label, and the other one seems very willing to shit out a bunch of features, so how about we get them both together and title the song Baby? And everyone will have a good laugh, and that alone will make it a hit. And that is exactly what happened. And you know what? That would have been fine if they put any effort into it. Again, DaBaby's verse is fine, but beyond intro off of Kirk, DaBaby is very one-dimensional in his flow and content, even if it's distinct to him. So I'd rather listen to Babysitter or Suge or Goin' Baby, or if I want a guest verse, Enemies, Under the Sun, and even Cash It, and I honestly don't even like that song. All of that would be better options than this. Honestly, if a song called Baby is going to be the most disliked song on YouTube, I'd much prefer it be this one. Number 7. There are several things I've picked up on in the last few years of being a part of a community that talks about hit songs, but one of the more prevalent topics I see is around what artists are destined to become one-hit wonders. But more and more, that classification really doesn't apply as much anymore. The go-to one-hit wonder from the last 4 years to people seems to be Designer. But as you may know, Designer actually had 2 hits. His massive #1 hit in Panda, but also his minor year-end placing hit Timmy Turner. And I've seen people botch one-hit wonder predictions with acts all over the map like Post Malone, Cardi B, or Lil Nas X, 2 acts so that even if their hype sputtered out, they still got second hits like Bastille, Nash, OT Genasis, even Lil Pump, Bazzi, and Rachel Platten got a second hit. Year-end placing or caught between years aside. Even looking to this year, no matter what Billboard says, Blueface's remix was the only reason Shotta Flow turned into a big hit, and NLE Choppa and YNW Melly managed to get another top 40 hit. And artists you could label as one-hit wonder relics of the past, like Snow, Mike Posner, and even Billy Ray Cyrus, all managed to get a new hit completely out of nowhere. And in the case of Billy Ray Cyrus and Mike Posner, those hits ended up becoming their biggest ever hits. And before anyone yells at me, yes, all 4 charting singles for Mike Posner are all under the top 30. I never said I thought he was a one-hit wonder. Hell, Billy Ray Cyrus had a top 40 hit with Miley get caught between the years of 2007 and 2008, but that further shows the concept of a single one-hit wonder isn't as common as you might think it is. But either way, I know this next artist was definitely looked at as a potential one-hit wonder when they scored a big hit, but they ended up having a very similar trajectory to G-Eazy. They got a hit, arguably off the back of the feature and the production helping, and they had some minor hits for a while, but nothing close to another year-end hit. But upon their next album cycle, they ended up getting 2 new hit songs, with one of them becoming their biggest ever hit. And both of those 2 hits they got were hits in completely different ways from each other. That artist would be a Boogiewood Hoodie, and I can't say I'm much of a fan. His 2017 hit Drowning might have been decent, but Kodak Black completely ruined the whole song. And I'd argue a Boogie's only really had one good song and a couple of features on a song that I found myself liking. Unfortunately, those features were collaborations with 6ix9ine, and I say unfortunately because so's this.
Swerving,
How you look so perfect on your worst day.
We really needed to give a Boogie 2 hits off this album, huh? Now thankfully Look Back at It is his best and biggest song, but on the other end of the spectrum, he made Fucking and Kissing, which features Chris Brown and is absolutely worse than you're expecting. Now thankfully this is not nearly as bad of a performance as a Boogie with the Hoodie can have, but that doesn't mean the song is worth anything. A Boogie's hook is okay, I guess, but his verse is fucking terrible. And sure, part of it's the lyrics, but like, he just sounds bad.
I fuck you from the back and leave you turned.
I guess I can get how people like this song, but for me, he just sounds like ass. Lyrically, this verse's point of view is all, girl, I'll fuck you good, baby, I'm a savage. If you test me, I'll fucking kill you.
Dig on inside of you, make you freeze, make you pose. I swear I ain't no killer, but test me if you want.
I really don't get some of these artists. Like, you can go off topic if you want. That doesn't necessarily hurt all songs. But if you're going to, make sure it isn't tonally clashing and really uncomfortable. Now, if this content change is still directed at the girl, you know, I don't want to think about that scenario, not today. Although maybe he chose to randomly flip the script like that out of nowhere so the 6ix9ine feature wouldn't be so out of place.
If a nigga wanna act out, got the Mac out.
Of course 6ix9ine's content only comes down to robbing and killing, to the point where I don't even know if there's a topic to go off of at this point. Everything's so scattered I have no clue. Stepping aside from that, London on a Track's instrumental is really bland to me. Weak guitar line over stereotypical trap bass, it's not worth shit and it does nothing for anything. Yeah, to be honest, 6ix9ine's the best part of this song. It's very out of place, which actually ends up helping the verse while hurting the whole song. Honestly, I expected 6ix9ine to step up with that auto-mush dog shit he'll do sometimes, but thankfully, he's actually doing what works for him. Y'all rapping about guns and killing you.
Got the effing on my body in the clip with hollow tips.
He's not really yelling to tonally fit this song, assuming this verse wasn't just pulled from something else considering it's a rest before a Boogie's album came out. That actually explained why he's entirely off topic from a Boogie's content. And that's actually not that far off. Now clearly 6ix9ine's re-recorded this verse from the original leak, and when that song came out 6ix9ine was absent, but at the same time the verse is entirely out of place because it wasn't made for swervin'. It comes out of nowhere, it doesn't fit with the content or the instrumental for that matter, and it's still the best part of the song. A Boogie with the Hoodie, for one, get a better name, it's just as ridiculous as Young Boy Never Broke Again and annoyingly as long, but more importantly, do better. I know you're capable of not sucking, and it'd be nice if you acted on that. Number 6. Let's be real, even if this was a quote off year for Drake, you know he'd be here at least once, right? Now, I didn't really have a bunch of songs to choose from this year, but considering Care Package's production being completely shit saved Money in the Grave from being a bad to shit tier song, that really only left me with one song. And I hear the backing track behind me and know it's not No Guidance. It's the one that I've hated since October 2018, and the one that's still all over radio and won't leave me alone. I'm so sick of this song. Now obviously I dislike all the songs on this list, and there are 5 songs I think are worse this year, but this is the song Overplay tortured me with the most this year, and I have waited a literal year to do this. I almost put it on last year's list, but I knew it would be more of a 2019 hit, and that list was already overfilled, so I waited. Thing is, this isn't even the worst foreign language song with Drake this year. The worst, of course, being so bad you might not have even known about it. Drake just keeps finding new and interesting ways to torture me, and it's almost impressive. Putting that train wreck aside, Mia's Drake's big Spanish hit, and if there's one song where constant overplay of an already bad song for an entire year got my blood boiling, it was absolutely this one. On a scale between I Like It to Calieta, I know I fucked that up, Bad Bunny's vocal performance isn't as bad as it gets, but I don't think his vocal tone can really pull off a song like this melodically, and that's a problem considering he's got more of the song than Drake. But considering Drake's performance is like one shade away from sounding whiny, the song wouldn't have been enjoyable either way. And yes, I don't speak Spanish, I can't directly understand what they're saying, but every time I hear that goddamn hook, it is ingrained in my brain that it translates to, tell them you're mine. Mine. You said it yourself when we were doing it. It's so pushy, kind of toxic, pretty gross, and it just makes Bad Bunny look bad and further adds to Drake's massive total of looking bad. It's the type of content where the only people I can see getting into it are the types of people who punch a cashier for talking to their significant others. Radio, please just let this die. No one cares anymore. Number 5. I hate that I'm saying this, I really do, but this was the year Ariana Grande burnout happened, and it happened in full force. Ariana Grande released her 5th album this year, just 6 months after her 4th album, Sweetener, and unfortunately, it is currently her worst album. Now, it's okay, but considering the highs Ariana Grande made throughout her whole career, this cycle has been a huge letdown. Now, the Thank You Next song, as well as Imagine, and even her Social House collaboration, Boyfriend, are all pretty good to outright great, but I'd argue as of 2018, Ariana Grande hadn't made anything close to a bad song. But in 2019, she made multiple bad songs, with all of them charting, and one of them became her biggest ever hit. And that hit completely shifted her image, seemingly as well as the trajectory of her career, and that just leaves me really concerned and very upset. And even if the bad song that's allowed this move to happen should probably be on the list, the follow-up single was so much worse.
Wake up with your girlfriend. Yeah, 'cause I'm bored.
It might not be the worst song Ariana Grande put out this year, but it's definitely the one that I was unwillingly exposed to the most, and it's also the one that pissed me off the most. This production is so flimsy and cheap. Marian Hill kinda did this sound with the Drop On Down 2 years ago, and that song might not have been good, but it was certainly better than this. But the bad instrumental aside, Ariana's not really delivering the quality performance she usually does, but it's Ariana Grande, she still sounds fine. The main problem comes down to the content. The writing on this song is so unlikable, I was legitimately shocked when it came out. Ariana Grande's been this pop sweetheart for her whole career, and that was fine because she was excellent at it. Her trying this whole entitled diva thing does not work at all. Seven Rings, Monopoly, Don't Call Me Angel, and this are all legitimately bad. And sure, the instrumentals are a major factor, if not most of it, depending. But Ariana Grande can't save them not because of how bad they are, but because Ariana Grande, for the first time in her entire career, is unlikable in this mold. It's not just disappointing, it's honestly upsetting. Ariana Grande has so much talent and capability, and she lasted over 5 years without making a bad song. There is absolutely no excuse for any of this. To focus in on this song, Ariana Grande sees this guy she thinks is attractive, but she then finds out that he has a girlfriend, and she wants him to break up with his girlfriend because she's bored. That's the example she gives. She wants this dude's relationship to end because she's bored. Ariana, you can have a fling if you want. Hell, I'm certain there were a lot of people that'd be very game for that. And a lot of those people don't need to end their relationships to do that. And by do that, I mean you. He's committed. Why should he end that to have a fling with you? Especially when, like you said, you've never even met this dude. I get you're only thinking about yourself here, but maybe view the bigger picture. And yes, I know she says what she's thinking is wrong, but that doesn't stop her from making this fucking song. And it doesn't even simply boil down to that bass problem.
Why can't we just play for keeps?
He is. That's why he won't fuck you, because he has a girlfriend. Again, the main issue here is that these songs make Ariana seem so unlikable. And here's the thing. It was only last year where Ariana Grande topped so many people's best list, including my own. Ariana gets way too much shit for stuff like Mac Miller's passing and the Manchester bombing, and the fact that she gets shit for either of those makes me madder than anything from any of the songs on this list. Ariana Grande has made so many songs I would legitimately call best of the decade material, hits or not. So the fact that she's hit burnout with so many people, and considering just how much Boyfriend and Don't Call Me Angel have underperformed in the same year Ariana Grande got the 3 highest peaking singles of her entire career, that has absolutely happened. Ariana needs to slow down. She just released an EP-sized amount of songs on that Charlie's Angels soundtrack, and I can't really say I liked any of those songs. I highly doubt Ariana could kill her career as of right now, but at the same time, if she doesn't take a break, and soon, she could be in serious trouble. Ariana Grande, please take a break, and hopefully when you come back, you'll be making good music again. At least I hope you will.
With your girlfriend.
True hurts needed something more exciting.
Number 4. So for this list in particular, I barely pay any attention in the last few weeks of the year, mainly for current lists. You never know if a song that gets big right at the end of the year will become even bigger in the following year, so I tend to hold off on including lately eligible songs. I can make exceptions if I see the song's likely going to be eligible weeks ahead, but in the case of Thank You Next, which spent the last 2 Billboard weeks of November 2018 at number 1, it's too fresh. It'll be more important for the next year. But if a song charts for, I don't know, 9 weeks before breaking the top 40 and staying there for the rest of the Billboard year, then yeah, it'll make the first year's list. So with that out of the way, we need to stop giving Chris Brown hits.
This trip got you in heat. He's jumping, baby girl, hop on his dick.
And if we could stop giving Gunna hits, I wouldn't really mind either. In my summer ranking for 2019 that I will be recording and uploading after the video you're watching, I talked about how I listened to every Chris Brown album. Beyond the fact that I already heard Heartbreak on a Full Moon and the rest of his albums had hits, therefore I'd need to deal with them eventually, I was curious to try and find out what made Team Breezy stand up for a dude that's done so much bad shit over the course of the last, like, decade. Music in the picture. And now that I've heard the whole discography, I hate him even more. Legitimately found 6 songs so bad I'd put them on a list of the worst songs I'd ever heard, 3 albums I'd give 2 out of 10s to, never mind the 4 3 out of 10s, and all of the more confirmation that Chris Brown at no point should have ended up with 1 hit. Never mind a career like this. Now, before you think I'm all the way biased, Chris Brown does have some good songs, and even if I don't love that he appears on my favorite songs playlist as well, Kanye West got him to actually sound incredible on Waves. And honestly, G-Eazy's Drifting also has a good hook from him too. And yeah, 3X, Forever, they're actually pretty good. I mean, the rest of songs of his I'd argue are worth anything, and I can count them on one hand with fingers left. They're due to the features and production and basically anything that isn't Chris Brown. This dude's career should have been killed by the music alone years ago, yet for some ungodly reason, he's still getting hits. And yeah, this is by an utterly massive margin not the worst song Chris Brown has ever made. For me, I personally think Baseline is the worst musically, with Runaway being the one to genuinely enrage me the most. Seriously, if you don't know what that song is, you should go listen to it. It's legitimately mind-blowingly offensive. The thing is, he isn't even the worst hit song Chris Brown has ever made. But I'm sorry, pairing Chris Brown with Gunna will never work. Hell, outside of Yosemite, I'm not even convinced Gunna can be good. The closest he got was Trip Too Hard, but honestly, that song as a whole feels more like a fluke of quality than any of the artists actually being consistently good. So although I will say Heat is better than I thought it would be, that's only because I had lower than rock bottom expectations for this. So yeah, this is still terrible. Gunna remains flavorless, droning, so painfully mediocre I would legitimately rather watch paint dry than listen to him. And his content is mostly the same basic brand name shit he does in every single verse on every single song. Although I will say Gunna talking about his jewelry and Heat causing this chick to have her, quote, juice running down her knee, it just sounds like she pissed herself. Especially when the song's called Heat. Although the real problem comes when Gunna says, quote, you acting like you really want it, you gon' get it, once I fuck you good, I got you. Now, it's hopefully not meant in the kind of predatory, abusive way it can come across, but when that kind of lyric is on a Chris Brown song, that does not help it in any way. And I'm not going to bring up any of the abuse cases against Chris Brown specifically, but those multiple accusations always paint what Chris Brown can say in very different lights. And since he's clearly never learned, he seems to not like avoiding lyrics that can be interpreted badly. He does it all the time, and this really isn't an exception.
All that ass for my people. Those eyes don't tell no lie. If you go ahead, it's gon' get knocked up. You gon' knock out by the end of this round. You know that I'm a weak girl, I know that you ready. I wanna get equal. You playing hide and seek, I'ma find you.
And never mind shit like this.
That's why the when I walk.
Dude, it kinda sounds like you pissed yourself. Sure, it's not nearly as bad as when Nav said he leaves puddles when he walks on baguettes in the face, but that imagery is still there, and this song already had some bad writing causing that specific kind of imagery. But sure, Chris Brown is trying to pleasure his girl by giving her oral, which yes seems like a step in the right direction, but Chris Brown's terrible voice is not only unsexy, but he just makes sex sound like it's the grossest shit in the entire world. Whenever Chris Brown talks about sex, it makes me want to never be exposed to anything sexual ever again. And the production isn't saving any of this. It's the kind of rickety trap production I don't much care for. And that fucking synth is so goddamn annoying it only sours the song even more. Honestly, I didn't even realize just how much I hated this until writing this piece. It's genuinely awful. And remember when I said earlier that this song was better than I expected? Yeah, Chris Brown and Gunna really have a low bar. This song's likely getting caught between years and won't be appearing on a year-end list, and the sooner it's forgotten, the better. Oh, fuck off.
True hurts needed something more exciting.
Number 3.
Dum, dum, dum.
So as I said towards the beginning, I added a song to this list at the very last minute because my hatred for this song just boiled over entirely, and after constant and non-stop exposure to it for months, I just couldn't take it anymore. I just hate this song so much, and I legitimately never want to hear it ever again. It just makes my blood boil. That said, let me reset. The other day, the concept of a jingle sort of came into my head because it's one of those things I know, but I never really think about it. For those of you who don't really know what a jingle is, it's this fragment of music that's rather catchy with the purpose of selling something. But when you take that equation of a jingle, you remove the part about it trying to sell a specific product, and it's just a hollow, empty song, You Get Only Human by the Jonas Brothers.
It's only you, and you know that it's real.
Flavorless, catchy, and pointless. That's this whole song in a nutshell. I like Sucker, and even if Overplay heard it, it's still a decent song. Now sure, if Cool had another top 40 week, it probably would have been on this list as well, but Cool got placed on a lot of my radio stations, and even if it was laughably terrible, I think this just might be even worse. Cool's instrumental was terrible, and from Ryan Tedder of One Republic, I expect so much better, but Only Human is a lot weaker. Here's the thing, the melody is insanely catchy. Hell, it might even be one of the catchiest hits we got this year.
Dance in my living room, slave to the way your move hurts when I'm living here.
The main problems are that they decided to stop trying in every other department after the melody, and after a while, that little earworm turns into a toxic parasite chewing away at your brain until you go fucking insane and you light a barn fire with you in it. That instrumental is so sloppy right from the very beginning. Literally just in the first 2 seconds. You can hear the opening drum loop cut after about a half a second as it starts to play itself again. What the fu- You just make the fucking loop longer. You don't need to be this damn sloppy. You know, there are other problems in the production, but everyone else will probably talk about that enough. But what really gets to me is... well, I mean everything. But let's just focus on the performing Jonas Brothers themselves. Something I realized this year was that I fucking hate Joe Jonas. I actually went through and listened to all of the Jonas Brothers albums, as well as Nick and Joe's solo endeavors. Although both were in bands at one point, so solo from each other. Nick started out with Nick Jonas and the Administration before going completely solo, and Joe started completely solo before joining DNCE. Now, Nick Jonas and the Administration I would describe as a mix between Justin Timberlake and older Maroon 5, so as you'd expect, I quite liked it. But then Nick went solo, and although his debut album was far from great, Last Year Was Complicated was actually really damn good. I do enjoy that album. But none of that makes up for what Joe Jonas made. His debut and only album, Fast Life, debuted on the Billboard 200 at 15, and it lasted a whole 2 total weeks on the charts. And going through the whole Jonas Brothers catalog, I didn't expect much of it to be great, but I didn't think any of it would really be that bad. Fast Life is one of the worst fucking albums I have ever heard. Holy shit. I guarantee most of you have never heard the album, and I strongly advise you never go listen to it. It's a rare 1 out of 10 for me, and there is absolutely nothing good about any of it. At least Scorpion had Nice for What. At least Professional Rapper had a great Brendan Urie hook, Fetty Wap and Snoop Dogg doing really well, and one decent joke resulting in a solid enough song. At least fucking 45-track Chris Brown Trainwreck Heartbreak on a Full Moon had the decency to have a feature or two pop up throughout, so it's not all one same train wreck for the whole 2-hour, 45-minute runtime. Honestly, besides Lil Dicky, this album might be worse than all of those. It's so consistently bad that it would have been very bad as a 4-track EP, but it's a 12-track, 49-minute album that feels like 3 hours. The shortest track by far being 3.5 minutes doesn't really help. This album is produced like absolute shit, and Joe Jonas had zero personality at that point, making this so hateable while being nothing distinct at the same time. No one needed this to happen at any point, but it did. Listening to Fast Life, then going to DNCE's album, and realizing I hate Cake on the Ocean while being one of the best songs on the album, it hit me that everything that's gone wrong with the Jonas Brothers in 2019 and probably moving forward is Joe Jonas's fault. Look at Sucker. Sure, Nick Jonas says we go together like birds of a feather, but I found out that's a reference to the proverb, birds of a feather flock together, so Nick's actually having supreme class, and other than that, some pretty standard love song lyrics. But then Joe Jonas stumbles his way in.
I've been dancing on top of cars and stumbling out of bars.
The hell are you doing? That has nothing to do with anything, and that's the pre-chorus. Although that's nothing compared to Cool. Nick Jonas is at least trying as he compares himself to James Dean, but then Joe decides to just reference shit that's popular right now to sound cool, and in turn he becomes an absolute idiot.
Oh, I feel like Post Malone, sitting there waiting like it's Game of Thrones.
And I thought Kevin Jonas was the dad. Of course the dude that made Cake by the Ocean would be this shitty of a writer. It all makes so much sense. And Only Human is mostly him, so of course you might expect me to shit on the lyrics being poorly written. And unfortunately, it's not that bad while being so much worse.
Why would you fight and try to deny the way that you feel? Baby, you can't fool me. Your body's got other plans. Stop pretending. pretending you're shy.
How stupid. In 2019, 19, do you all have to be to write shit like this? Never mind the fact that you wrote this, but you put it out as the third song on your album, right after the two lead singles. This was the first fresh impression on the album when it came out. I know that they're shitty ass writers and the rapey undertones are far from what they intended, but that's exactly what the problem is. They just made the song, completely shit it out without putting any greater thought into it, just like the rest of Happiness Begins, which was an album that drained both of them of their personalities for better or worse, and it was successful because, whoa, nostalgia, the Jonas Brothers are back! I like when my nostalgia gets pandered to, and again, I used to watch their show when I was younger, but this song alone pushed me over the edge. So with that, I'm running for president in 2020, and my first step is to outlaw nostalgia pandering. We will only create fresh new things, leaving the past in the past. That way nothing like the shitty Jonas Brothers reunion can ever happen again. Also more trans rights, because more of that wouldn't hurt anyone.
True hurts needed something more exciting.
Number 2.
Dum-be-dum-bum-bee.
Some of you may be wondering where Someone You Loved by Lewis Capaldi will be showing up on this list. The truth of the matter is, it's contending for the other one. I don't want to get into it too much, but I went through a really hard breakup this year, and it hasn't been easy at any point. As you might know from last year's best list, my own personal life does greatly affect how I perceive music, and as such it can lead me to defending some songs that I might otherwise not like. If my relationship lasted all year, the song maybe would have ended up on this list. However, my own emotional baggage and real-life turmoil doesn't save all songs from getting on my good side. So you can all hate Someone You Loved all you want. But there was a different white guy sad song this year that pissed me off a whole lot more.
It'll be alright.
Despite throwing the songs on dishonorable mention spots, I rarely hate the white guy ballad or the white guy with an acoustic guitar fluke hits we get. I'm a self-admitted Maroon 5 fan. My whiteness affects my feelings for that genre sometimes, and science hasn't found a cure for it yet. But even then, I have my limits, and this exceeds them. Now, the instrumental is exactly what you always get with these types of songs. It's a sterile arrangement that's devoid of any color, and what strikes me is how fake the drums sound, which is odd considering they keep in that noise you get from a real guitar when you let go between chords.
Love her, but it's over, mate.
Either have all the instruments be or at least sound real, or have it all be or sound fake. Just pick one. But that's the least of what gets on my nerves, because if my own personal bias bleeds through for any of these picks, I'd argue it's this one. I hate it when someone says it'll be alright, especially to someone who's going through a really tough time. I think if you see someone going through something bad, if you don't reach out at all, you probably don't really care. Now, I understand people are fucking terrible at communicating emotions, but even trying to reach out, just to say I'm sorry you're going through a rough patch, even if they push you away, it's better than saying nothing. At the same time, I'd argue saying it'll be alright or something to that effect is by far the worst comforting thing you can say. Because it's weak, it's beyond dollar store generic, and it's entirely empty. Yeah, one of my favorite songs is G-Eazy's Everything Will Be Okay, but that song's about G-Eazy's life, between love, troubles with being a part of his family, and his mom packing everything, taking the kids, and leaving her husband, their father, for another woman, and him learning to accept that. With Kalani's hook of Everything Will Be Okay used in contrast to G-Eazy's excellent storytelling. It's used in contrast to G-Eazy's life, specifically showing vulnerability with what he's experienced to say we all go through rough patches, and it's hard. And there's a pause between that final verse and the final hook for a reason. It's not to follow up the darkest experience he's probably went through with an immediate turn to say everything will be okay. But for Be Alright, I can't even muster up 100th of the praise for Everything Will Be Okay. Because even if the song does half tell some stories, they're too disconnected from that hook with the lack of connection and detail to make any of it work. Because 1 second Dean Lewis is talking about his girlfriend trying not to cry as she reveals the cigarettes left on the counter weren't her friends, but his. And right before an expected full reveal of cheating, the hook starts with the lyric, "And my friend said, I know you love her, but it's over," completely and abruptly steering away from openly cutting into what happened, to pull the whole "you may be sad, but get over it, it'll be okay." And then it goes into the second verse, with him still looking at her messages, knowing it's not okay, but it was fucking with him. And of fucking course I did the exact same thing, full honesty. But it annoys me here because it completely skips over the part of the story that would actually have real impact in it. It doesn't help that I can't stand Dean Lewis's voice, especially when he goes for those extended notes. It's unpleasant, and it's the worst part of any of these white songs from the last few years. Yes, I think it's worse than this.
And I
There's a point to that kind of delivery in a heartbreak song where you're depressed over your ex. There's a hint of anger in that kind of rawness, but to have that in a message of let her go, you'll be okay, it's ugly in the wrong way. It doesn't work tonally, and it makes my skin crawl. Sure, it's produced well, it doesn't peak in the mix, that doesn't mean it's good. But back to my point, the problem I have with this sentiment is simple, because sure, it'll be alright, it'll work out, but how the fuck does that help me now? You're right, I might have just had a girl rip out my heart, spit on it, and drag me through spikes for a month straight, but I forgot I'll feel better in 20 years. Thank you so very much. Yeah, bite me. For me personally, I think I'd rather someone after only 20 minutes of heartbreak call me a bitch-ass pussy man-child who needs to shut the fuck up than have someone tell me it'll be okay. Obviously I don't want either, but out of the bottom options. So having this song smeared all over the radio when I was hurting the most, yeah, I hated my life just a little more. But to make my point clear, if you see someone going through a really hard depression, if you care about them, just reach out. Even if you don't know what the right thing to say is. For the record, there is no right thing to say, but it's better to try than to just sit aside and do nothing. It goes a long way when you reach out. Trust me, I know. Either way, if I want to hear a song where the performers are using the word mate, I'll go listen to Young Thug and Future's Sup Mate. At least they made the song good.
It'll be alright.
Before we get to the number one, here are a few dishonorable mentions.
Niggas been counting me out, I'm counting my bullets, I'm loading my clips.
One of the few opinions from the spring ranking that is still 100% intact.
You need to calm down.
This just got worse than it was in the summer with every single listen.
Everything litty, I love when it's hot.
Look, I'm happy Young Thug is getting a lot of hits now, but I also wish all of them were good. And unfortunately, this is the worst song from So Much Fun, and also the highest peaking single from that album. I blame Gunna.
Stop watching. My neck is fuzzy.
I soured all the way on this. Easily the worst number one hit this year, especially out of the big ones. If in the future I regret not putting a song on the list proper, I wouldn't be shocked if it's this. Unless it's this. This is one of those hits we get right at the very end of the prior year that missed that year end. So when we're around a full year later and you see it for the first time on this year end, you wonder how the hell people even let it happen. The original script for this entry will get used at a later date, but to sum up most of it, this song is overly processed, badly performed, overall sounds like shit, and you should stream Luke Combs' follow-up single Even Though I'm Leaving because it is genuinely great. I don't want to see anyone give me shit for putting this version on the list when the Billy Ray Cyrus remix ended up completely overtaking it in the long run. It had stupidly good streaming and sales forever, and let's not forget this version went to #1 before Billy Ray Cyrus's remix had any impact on the chart. This counts.
Oh, she's sweet but a psycho.
In the spring ranking, I joined the group of people pointing out how this song completely rips off 2009's Down by Jay Sean. But thanks to a YouTube comment on that video, I found out what the drop of the bridge is ripping off. What a hack.
Leave me alone. I got one they envy me.
I'm not even convinced anyone cared about this song at any point. Stream Chariot, it's the only song Callboy will ever have worth anything. This should have been mentioned on last year's list. I fucking hate this song.
Hot damn, hot water, hot shower.
Now that we're in the ineligible section, I'd like to state that this song would absolutely be top 3 if it were eligible. The Big Day wasn't as bad as people were claiming, but this sure is.
Talk you out of it.
This ended up on the year-end list, but it literally peaked at 57, so it's not even eligible. Which is a lose-lose because it's awful and a hit, but I can't rip into it yet because it isn't eligible. I should probably tweak my rules, but I don't know, I like the rules beyond cases like this.
We love the earth.
For the record, BTS somehow kept this from being eligible, and I thank them greatly.
You made me this way, yeah.
I'm honestly glad this didn't get a second top 40 week, so I don't have to talk about it. You can add the other one. Charting Latin posse cuts seem to just always suck and suck hard.
Monopoly.
The most cheap, throwaway, pointless of ever existing song Ariana Grande was ever a part of, and she's literally from a children's show. I don't know if I ever heard a song this lame, honestly.
I will give you the world, baby girl.
I added this right before this video came out after I heard the album Fuck YK Osiris. This song alone honestly made me fine with Nicki claiming retirement. Seriously, fuck this song.
it off the juice, twist it off the juice.
Hey Logic, go to hell.
1-800, then I kill the pussy. Who can relate?
Yes, that's real.
I was really rooting for you.
I heard this on the radio somewhat recently and I was baffled. Seriously, what the hell happened to Alessia Cara? Okay, that's enough. Let's finish this.
I was really rooting for you.
Number 1. I guess on some level, I guess it's a good thing this video ended up running late, because this would have been dated in the absolute worst way almost immediately. I just want to be open about this. I predetermined my picks based on what songs I like the least from that year, and real-world events that don't change how the song's viewed won't affect my own taste. I won't feel differently about the song. It's cases like this where I really wish I did, and unfortunately, there wasn't a hit song this year that ended up being close to as bad as this one. For the first time ever, I really wish there was, but unfortunately, there isn't. I really don't want to do this now, I really don't, but removing most of the anger from my segment and some comments that would have made me an insensitive asshole, there has to be a worst hit song for this year, and as much as I don't want to give it to him considering his very, very recent and very tragic death, I'm an honest man, and I am legitimately sorry. I really don't want to do this. I genuinely mean that. And out of all the times I've made worst lists, this is the first time for a worst list entry I actually didn't want to do it on any level. Unfortunately, Juice WRLD did, for me, have the worst hit song of the year. But before I go into this, let me just make this clear. I didn't love a lot of Juice WRLD's music, but waking up to find out he passed away genuinely shook me, and I mean, I still can't believe it. This feeling has been with me the entire time since he passed. The whole day of him passing, he was all I could think about the entire day. On Twitter when Juice WRLD passed, I didn't bring up his music at all. Not just because I didn't like a lot of it, but it's because him dying this tragically and so young is so heartbreaking, no matter what you thought of his music. So instead of just saying rest in peace and then, you know, ripping into the song topping the worst list, let me showcase a couple songs and features from him that I actually do like. My easy favorite Juice WRLD song officially released is called Lean With Me. It's this dark, unstable song where he's swerving out of control on drugs. The guitar line in that dark atmosphere actually pair well with his voice, even when he strains it in the way I almost always disliked coming from him. Another song of his I mostly like is Trippie Redd's 1400-999 Freestyle, in which Juice WRLD not only has all the hooks, but a verse. And yes, I really don't like the line about beating it up like Ike Turner. That's a line that will never work, and I have no clue why I've heard so many iterations of the same line so much, but beyond that terrible bar, the flows are on point and Juice WRLD rides over the beat rather well. Another feature I didn't mind was actually his performance on Nuketown. He goes toe-to-toe on a track with Ski Mask the Slump God, where they both have really good flows in between passages where they both yell out bars, and Juice WRLD actually manages to hold his own really well in that mold. I also think his remix of Lil Tecca's Ransom made it feel like an actually finished song, and even if I didn't fully love it, his verse on Ellie Goulding's Hate Me fit the song really well, and the melodic part to close out the verse actually works rather well. The last song I'll bring up was the leak collaboration with the Chainsmokers called In My Head. The song on the leak was definitely unfinished considering the drop was barely produced yet, but the beat behind the rest of the song is really good. So good, it actually ended up under Lil Nas X song Closure. On that song, Juice WRLD has both verses where he talks about depression, stress, life not really being fair, but also acknowledging that maybe it's just all in his head. And the second verse has him questioning if he'll see better days, how he's seeing his demons through a kaleidoscope, and he reiterates advice to let nothing bring you down. It's a really good song, and I wouldn't mind it if someday it came out. Unfortunately, I actually have to get to this entry at some point, but let me just say this. Juice WRLD did a lot of good. Even if his music painted a gross picture at some points, I will address that within this song. Again, the fact that he died at such a young age means he won't be able to evolve his music, and he won't be able to grow up and become the best version of himself he could have been. He died less than a week after his 21st birthday. That's a short life, and he did deserve to see his whole life out, and it's really upsetting that he won't get to. I feel for his family, his friends. I believe he had a girlfriend, and, you know, all of his fans that did get something meaningful out of his music. Even if I found a lot of what he made to be juvenile, sloppy, and at points full of toxic masculinity, there is a market for that kind of thing. His music means a lot to a lot of people. It connected. When I say rest in peace Juice WRLD, I do legitimately mean that, and I hope you know that I legitimately mean that. But I can't just change my taste and opinion when the song doesn't have any different meaning under this shitty as hell situation. If everyone who had a hit in 2019 passed away, I wouldn't just say there's no bad music this year, so no list. I make these lists off of what hits we got, and unfortunately, I just can't defend this one. It's the worst hit song of the year, and I wish it wasn't.
She told me put my heart in a bag.
Sometimes Juice WRLD came off very whiny, like on Lucid Dreams or All Girls Are the Same, and I didn't think that problem would get worse, but on Robbery, that absolutely happened. I don't want to beat around the bush, this is the worst song I have heard from Juice WRLD. And sure, I don't really like the instrumental he's over, but unfortunately, none of that really matters to me when Juice WRLD gave his worst performance on a song with some mind-numbing writing. On Robbery, Juice WRLD split the difference of an edgy middle schooler and a drunk guy interrupting his ex's wedding ceremony, and truthfully, it's the most grating performance I've heard from him. He has had a lot of good performances for the record, but this just wasn't one of them. And as a reminder, I heard Goodbye and Good Riddance, and I heard Death Race for Love. When I say this is probably his worst performance, I mean it. Although to be fair, the content might impact some of that.
She told me put my heart in a bag. Ain't nobody gets hurt.
Although on second thought, I think it might be the poor performance that made the content worse. Cause here's the thing, when Post Malone made Over Now, where he was going to quote, put that bitch pussy in a motherfucking body bag, even with the overly heavy drums and eerie melody, he actually sold it well within his overblown vocals coming through. People could actually buy into it for a little bit, it's a good song. Meanwhile, Juice WRLD's performance made that example sound like it's the worst lyric he's had, despite only actually being pretty bad. Cause you need to remember this is the same dude that made Roses Are Red, Violets Are Blue, My Heart Is Dead, I'm Such a Fool. A lot of his writing came across very juvenile and toxic with very little to no framing to make any of it really work. And for this kind of song, sometimes not great writing can be balanced out if your performer can sell that vibe well. And considering the thing Juice WRLD pulled off the best as a performer was being an unstable, drug-using asshole, a lot of the time the raw heartbreak songs didn't really come together well, especially when he talked about killing the girl, which he did multiple times. Even briefly shelving that, the vocals on this track are just kinda rough.
For you, was your love for real?
But a terrible vocal performance is only so much worse when this is your writing.
One thing my dad told me, never let your woman know when you're insecure.
See, it's stuff like this why I can't just forget about this song. This is not the kind of thing I can just forget about. Yes, it's good to be strong for the person you're in a relationship with, but if anything, it's so much more important to be vulnerable, to talk about what pain you're feeling, and saying this now just makes the passing of Juice WRLD so much sadder for me. Because he was so young, that he's not only listening to, and spreading the concept of not sharing what you're dealing with, to say this is what his heart told him.
Flex on a hoe every time you're insecure.
And now that he's gone, I know these hits, as well as his XXXTentacion and Lil Peep tribute song Legends, they'll be highly regarded, considered classics, raw art, but for this song, that's my problem. Here's the thing that shouldn't be forgotten in history now that Juice WRLD is gone and we're all being respectful for him. And no, it's not about this one song, it's all of the songs that are this type of Juice WRLD song. No one I've seen who's talked about this song have been able to take it seriously, whether they like the song or not. The people I had talked to within the Twitter community that do like this, they like it ironically, because you can't take it seriously. The problem with that mindset for me is that there's no way to like a Juice WRLD song of this caliber in an ironic way, because he sold them completely straight. And I do take this seriously, because I also know the people that streamed this for months, and gave it several weeks in the top 40, and to my knowledge somewhere between 16 and 18 weeks in the Hot 100, they bought into it legitimately. This song had 0 radio play the whole time, for what truthfully could come down to several reasons, so all that success came from the general public, specifically on streaming. The general public won't keep a song around for that long if it's only ironic. And after he passed away, this was one of the songs to rise up the most on streaming and iTunes, and you know under these circumstances, nothing that causes a song to get traction is ironic. This whole conversation applies to his biggest hit, Lucid Dreams, the song I covered extensively on my worst list last year, but that brings me to the argument for both of these songs and all of Juice WRLD's heartbreak songs that really does frustrate me. Your dislike for this song proves that you've never had had a relationship where you're in love and it ends, where you end up devastated and heartbroken. This type of comment did get under my skin when I got it about lucid dreams in 2018, because even if once I grew up and realized it wasn't an actual real relationship with genuine love, I did have a relationship with someone I thought I loved end, and at the time, of course, it was devastating. So I brushed off those comments because, like the writing on that song, it was plain ridiculous. But as I mentioned while talking about Be Alright, I did have a relationship at the beginning of this year, and after falling madly in love, we did have a breakup this year, and I'll talk about this at a different time. But after this big breakup where I was legitimately heartbroken, I did start viewing songs like, say, Without Me by Halsey very differently. I could connect to parts of this song more than I was able to before, and as such, those songs got better with a fresher viewpoint where I could freshly relate more. With Lucid Dreams, I said it was the 10th worst hit song of 2018, a year with a very packed worst list where I did have notable cuts. With this painful heartbreak under my belt now, I have to be honest, I hate the song more. If I made that list now, it would be higher. Because something like Heartbreak, especially the first heartbreak from a relationship where you legitimately fell deeply, madly in love, is something that shouldn't be mocked, because it's not a joke. And watching his Breakfast Club interview from earlier in the year, I actually know Juice WRLD did know this. But with the weaker and somewhat laughable writing Lucid Dreams or Robbery has, it can also paint the picture that this is how heartbreak should make you react, and I really don't think this is a legitimate reaction from someone over the age of like 14, maybe deep down mentally, but not in practice. And this is coming from someone who had public meltdowns on social media due to admitted instability. And that's just how poorly this shit was written. The difference is, my lashing out wasn't premeditated and wasn't crafted in any way. It wasn't commercially packaged, picked as the lead single, and even if it was just as petty, at least people who engaged in it knew it was legitimate and took it seriously. And I know it's serious because Juice WRLD played it completely straight when he talked about it on The Breakfast Club, even talking about how shocked he was that a lot of people connected with it. But that just makes me think that maybe I'm being too hard on this kind of thing. Yeah, I think this type of reaction is immature, but I mean, that doesn't mean it's invalid. Who the fuck am I to dismiss how someone reacts to being heartbroken? I get it. Robbery isn't the worst hit song of the year because the emotion in there is bad. It just wasn't executed well in the song. The song was bad for the writing and performance and a weaker instrumental, not the emotion Juice WRLD felt. I actually re-listened to both of Juice WRLD's albums, and even if both weren't really great or even that good, I get them more, and there are added layers to it considering his death. This is a weird note to conclude this video on, but if you're curious, I want you to look into the songs I mentioned, as well as songs like Long Gone or I'll Be Fine. They might have rough spots, but if anything, it's more of a reminder that Juice WRLD hadn't fully polished anything yet. Not just his music. Rest in peace to Juice WRLD. He had a big impact on a lot of people, and probably the music to come. There's a lesson in here somewhere, but for the first time in a piece like this, I don't know what that lesson is, but I hope we learn it soon. I really do.
You know what? That's not how it's supposed to